This is Classical Conversations. I'm Haley Taylor, and joining me today is Lara Downes. Hello, Laura.
Good morning. So nice to talk with you.
It's great to talk with you as well. I'm so excited to talk about this album. You know, you're an American piano soloist. You've released albums in the past covering Billie Holiday, Stravinsky, Bernstein, but this one feels a bit different than all the ones that you've released before. Can you tell us a little bit about Holes in the Sky?
So first of all, the title, Holes in the Sky, comes from a quote from the artist Georgia O'Keeffe. It's from a letter that she wrote when she was still pretty young and sort of just, defining herself, finding her place as an artist. It was the year she had just met the love of her life, and she's writing this letter to her best friend and describing the life that she envisions ahead or that she's hoping for. And she's just talking about big things, big love and big life. And she says, I want music that makes holes in the sky. And I read that quote and I thought, I get that. I totally get that. And, what does it mean to me? And somehow it led me to think about women like Georgia O'Keeffe and like Billie Holiday and, these women who break the mold and change their paths, are brave and bold and define new territories. And I thought, well, that, is certainly a tremendous inspiration to me. And what exists musically for me within that space. So that's what we have here, Holes in the Sky, musical holes in the sky made by women.
And I can tell from your website that there's a kind of a bigger mission associated with it. It said, on your website that the album is presented in support of Plan International and the Los Angeles Downtown Women's Center and the Lower East Side Girls Club of New York. Can you tell me a little bit about those organizations and why it was important to be connected with them on this album?
Yeah. I've been trying, I think, in the last few years more and more to do things that help, to be useful in the world as an artist. I think, especially spending an entire year in the shadow of Leonard Bernstein really made me think deeply about that. For him, music was a message and a mission and part of a much bigger picture about helping humanity and being a citizen. And I live by that. But I think that for those of us who advocate for the arts and who believe and will say that, art and music are essential to humankind, we also have to consider the other things that are very essential to humankind, like food and water and healthcare and education. And, these are big issues and big jobs to do. And so I'm trying for the first time to put my music in the mission of, social good by partnering with institutions and individuals who are working in those other areas so that we can all make things better, because I do think that art and music are essential to humans. And I think that, life without them is not what life should be. But I think that when, there are other tremendous problems and deficits, then we can't, obviously the picture can't be complete. So it's been an interesting process and really an expanding one to partner with organizations to put, to support just via the, album sales and special events. We're doing a lot of special events to raise awareness and raise funds for these organizations, and just to learn more too about, what is going on, the work that's going on in our world to help people among us. Yeah.
And creating this project, was that blueprint always there from the beginning, this mission of creating art that could support these organizations but could also support, the future generations of young women?
Yeah, I think it was. I think that, this isn't just an album of music that happens to be written by women. It's really an album of music that all contains within it sort of a story of optimism, potential, power. And I think that as a female artist, I see for myself a large responsibility to be a role model to, young girls and young women. And, through the way that I do my work and my career and my life, I try to really illustrate that. Certainly all of the music on the album, all of the women featured on the album, there are stories of a lot of obstacles overcome, challenges met, and expression, this human expression that seems to be able to come through all kinds of difficulties, which I think is honestly what defines great art, probably more than genius. It's really just this need, this basic human need to express the self, and that's what makes beauty in the world. And so, yeah, I think that putting this music together, I always had in mind a story to tell that could inspire and give guidance, or sort of show the way, to the next generation of women coming up.
And you mentioned the soloists. There are some pretty incredible names on this album, like Judy Collins and Rhiannon Giddens and Simona Dinnerstein, Rachel Barton Pine. Can you talk about contacting these people, like Judy Collins? Like, how did you know her beforehand? Did you kind of know, I want that sound on this particular song? How did all that happen?
Yeah, Judy was somebody I knew only from the covers of records in my parents' record collection, and a voice and a face that I'd grown up with, and that really exemplified for me a generation, and a very courageous and important generation. As a songwriter, as an activist, as part of that generation in the 60s that really put their music in the forefront of American struggles and American dreams. It was very important to me to try to capture that as part of this project. So I just reached out. I just cold called Judy, wrote, a pretty extensive letter to her about what this project was and why I was hoping that she'd be part of it. And it took a while to hear back. But then when I did, I was so thrilled about that. And I think that moment probably determined more of this, this mission, this vision about what this music can say. Because just to have her participation, with that history behind it, it really made me determined to accomplish something meaningful.
Many people wander up the hills from all around you, making up your memories and thinking they have found you. They cover you with veils of wonder as if you were a bride.
And it seems like this album is like a wonderful collage of different kinds of songs that either you're covering. Willow Weep for Me is on there. I know Billie Holiday and Frank Sinatra has done their own covers of it. But then also it seems like there's originals as well. So I'm thinking of Notes of Gratitude. Mm-hmm. It sounds almost like it was played on a prepared piano. Can you tell me a little bit about that song?
Yeah, and that's a new work. It's a world premiere recording by Jennifer Higdon, who is a fantastic composer and so prolific and so courageous in her work, and also a beautiful human being whom I love to spend time with. So she sent me this piece, which hadn't been heard before, and I found the sound world of it to be something really interesting and something that I thought added a new dimension to the project. It's the technique that you hear is just stopping the strings inside, with one hand, so that there's like a muffled sound, and then there's a contrast, of course, between those passages and others where the piano really expands, and you just make use of all of the colors that the instrument can produce. And the title of it too really spoke to me, Notes of Gratitude. There's so much within this project that's about just being thankful for these for this line of women who have come before and made all of this possible for us. So it seemed like an important sort of landing space within the project, and I think it hits right about the center of the album and creates kind of an interesting arc, I think.
And also I want to chat about the last song on the album, which I really loved, All the Pretty Little Horses. Can you tell me a little bit about that piece of music?
Well, that was a lullaby that my mom sang to me when I was a baby.
Aww.
It's the song I remember her singing to me, and so I wanted to feature that. And it's a beautiful arrangement that I wrote together with Laura Karpman, who's a wonderful composer based in LA. And I loved the process of recording the song. So one of the things that was really part of my vision was to also include and highlight and support the next generation of female artists. So this track is recorded with a whole bunch of girls who are all, I think, under the age of 16 when we recorded the song in Chicago. Ifeitayo Ali Landing, who's a gorgeous young cellist, plays a cello line, and then there's a vocal group based out of Chicago called Musicality, fantastic, tremendously talented kids, and the girls from that group came in, and we just knocked this song out in a couple of takes, and they were so just, they're kids, right? So enthusiastic and excited, and just giving of their hearts, and I think it's a beautiful track and a beautiful way to wrap up the album.
I agree. I loved it. I thought it was so beautiful.
Thank you. Thanks.
You mentioned your mom. I can imagine that as you were creating this album, you probably were thinking of or reminded of, important women in your life who've impacted your journey. I'm sure your mom is one of them, but can you talk a little bit about those people in your life who've helped you, get to the place where you are now?
Yeah. Well, my mom, of course, my mom made everything possible and has always been my greatest supporter, and, for many years, my driver, and all of those things that moms are. My very first piano teacher was an incredible woman who gave me a start that, in retrospect, really sort of defined who I am as a musician. Her approach was to really explain the stories behind the music, the context behind the music from the very beginning. And I realize more and more all the time how meaningful that was to me. And then, I have to say, there was a long period of time when I really didn't have any female mentors. All of my teachers were men. All of the great artists I saw around me were men. And so I think part of this project is to recognize the importance for me of every single time that I did come across someone who was, who was a woman who with whom I could identify. And that's, everything from Clara Schumann, when I first read about her in the history books and learned her music, to, the great artists who did pop up, of course, with much fewer frequency than the men, but and not just as pianists, but the great singers, the just every opportunity to really touch the tremendous power of female creativity. Those moments were so impactful. The reason that I did the Billie Holiday project a few years ago was that I remember listening to those records so much as a kid and just learning so much about the risk taking, the reshaping that one can do. There are some powerful lessons to learn, I think.
Well, speaking of that, like on this particular project, what was a lesson that you learned on this album, Holes in the Sky?
Oh, that women collaborate really well. That was the lesson. There were some beautiful moments with all the composers, with all of the collaborators. There was just really a tremendous spirit of generosity. And again, this willingness to experiment and for no one to be right, for everyone to just kind of jump in and say, well, what can we do together today that's beautiful? It was an incredibly joyful process. And also, we're all busy and juggling crazy lives. And so the ways that we were able to communicate, it was really like this microcosm of female existence, sending texts back and forth at 2 a.m. because that's when you have a moment, and
right.
And just juggling all these things. When I recorded the track with Layla McCalla, the Billie Holiday song, Don't Explain, I had to go down to New Orleans because she had just given birth to twins, like not even 2 months before. And, the day that we escaped to the studio was really the first time that she'd left the babies at home. So, it was all of these life moments that we were all living during the process of making this record. It just was a very human and very loving experience.
And you can definitely hear that on the album. I loved it. So thank you so much. I'm really excited for this project and really for the mission of Holes in the Sky, again, on Sony Masterworks. I can't wait to share it with our listeners. So thank you, Laura, so
Thanks
much
so much.
For the conversation. Thank you.
Thanks. It's a pleasure. Take care.